Hey guys, Trevor Holt here. I've got a special guest with me today, Sarah McGuire. How are you today, Sarah?
Good, thank you. Good to catch up.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me today. We're just going to have a quick conversation about this fire ant eradication program. So, did you want to just talk about how you got involved in the campaign to stop the toxic fire ant program?
Yeah, sure. Well, I got the brochures in the mail back in March. The first thing I read was, we're coming onto your property to put pesticides around for fire ants, and we don't need your permission. And I just saw red with that. I'm like, no, you're not coming on my property. I don't have fire ants. Haven't even seen one since I've been in Australia for 20 years. So I then contacted Save the Bees, and we set up the Facebook group of Stop the Toxic Fire Ant Program, and that's how we've all kind of met and connected.
Yeah, and that was only in March, and since they put them brochures in you, which were junk mail, obviously not addressed to you either. Since they put that in your letterbox and you started the campaign, you've also had some much more serious problems with the program in your local area there.
Yeah, that's right. And then on the 26th of May, the choppers came to Sanford, and they were swooping all around our valley at 7:30 on a Sunday morning. And we watched them dump a load of this poison into our creek and river. And so, with subsequent water tests showing high levels of pyriproxyfen actually gone into our waterways, we've done obviously lots of research now, and the program's in big trouble for doing what they did, but we wonder how many other suburbs they've done this to. And subsequently, yes, good to have a chat today about what pyriproxyfen is actually doing.
Yeah, and I suppose that's how I got involved as well. I was a little bit been involved with this program a lot longer than you, and my history sort of dates back to 2019. The university up here had some fire ants around it, and somehow, and I didn't even get involved in what they were doing, or didn't really care. I was just living my life and just let them do what they did, and I trusted what they were doing because they said it's safe and effective, and that I didn't even know about fire ants either. But since I've joined you on this campaign and joined heaps of others, I've sort of done a bit of research, as you know, and it turns out that we were, I think, originally it was 5 kilometres, but then it went to 8 kilometres, I feel, from a known nest. So because I was in that radius circle, they started treating us in 2019. Originally aerial baiting too, with the helicopter on top of our property, and in our dams and that. But I wasn't concerned about the actual poisons being dropped. I was more concerned about the helicopter noise disturbing my cattle. And and then sort of, I don't even remember how I whinged about it, or whether I yelled and screamed at someone at the front, or whether I was on the phone to someone, or whether I pulled the brochures out of it because it's just junk mail. I didn't read them, or I don't know. It wasn't something that I kept control of. But I remember having an argument about it because it was supposed to be 200 metres from the dam and supposed to be 200 metres from where you live, and all this sort of stuff. So and then the next time they come with motorbikes, and that was just as devastating for my cattle and my horses too. But I didn't really think about the poisons at all. I didn't know anything about them. I know they were quite excessive in their distribution in the early days, but I didn't really think about it. But in November 30 last year, I lost my first calf. Never lost a calf before. Galloway cow. It was a boy, actually, bull calf. But at the time, we didn't really think much of it. A lot going on around the Christmas time break and this and that. We had a few things, but and it was very sad, I suppose, because we breed these cattle for mental health purposes, and we hold and train them and this and that. But then in June, another calf was born with defects, and this one actually had tight tendons, and that's what we originally treated it for. It was like standing on its tippy toes, that was the first time we've ever seen that as well. Never seen that before. We still weren't that concerned about it, but we were more observant of this calf after the first one died, because normally these cattle just look after themselves. You don't have to worry about them. You don't have to monitor them. You don't have to look after them. They just never had any problems. We've had literally dozens and dozens, even up to 100 calves over a 10-year period, never had any problems before. And after a few days, after a week, I suppose, we got the vet out to have a look, and they actually treated it for tight tendons. They can actually put an antibiotic in their system to loosen it up or rah. Anyway, it never got better, but we noticed it was actually declining in cognitive ability as time went on, and it was very similar to the time frame, because the other calf took 6 weeks to die from when it was born to when we euthanized it, and it was actually dying in the paddock. My partner was there with it, like when we first discovered that it had a problem. It was too late. Obviously, it was already in the total decline. That first calf, we took it to the vet after a while, but it was late at night. The vet checked it for snake bites and checked the blood and this and that, done whatever tests on it to eliminate anything untoward or whatever. But ultimately, that the vet didn't have any space in the freezer or the fridge for the necropsy, they call it, an autopsy for cattle. So we just said, oh, we'll take it home and bury it, and that's what we did. But the second one, as it's declining, we were asking the vet, what blood test should we do, or what can we do to try to get to the bottom of this? But they said there's nothing we could really do, and we euthanized it at 6 weeks, and then we took it to the USQ here to do the report. And it's interesting that you should say about your experience at the Samford Valley, because I was scrolling on LinkedIn, it was, and there was a reporter on there that took your story, and I seen your footage of you walking around the Samford River or one of the Dawson River or whatever it was, taking that footage and talking about that. And they were talking about how some people had been reporting miscarriages in livestock and problems and that with birth defects in that article. And I started thinking, well, hang on a minute, I've had two calves die in the last 6 months, and these symptoms sound very similar to my symptoms, and we've had the same bait that you guys were talking about there in the Samford Valley drop on our property. And then I started looking into it a bit more. So that's how I got involved. And I originally asked the program for some information on because I'd never kept any records about the dates and the times and that, and the poisons that they put on, and it was like crickets. I said, look, they just ignored you. So so then I sort of reached out to you, and there was a few others, isn't there? A few other people on the Gold Coast, and a few other environmental people and that we talked to and get some information from, and slowly work it out. But today, like you said, we want to talk about these two chemicals. Pyriproxyfen, is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's called pyriproxyfen. Some people call it pyriproxyfen, but it's
something like that.
Yeah.
So what we might do is just look at the safety data sheet that's actually supplied by the manufacturer, and so that's it there. Let me just scroll down a bit. It's the active ingredient in this product called distant ant bait, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the distance ant bait, which is one of two products that the program used. Environmental hazards. It's a chronic
aquatic chronic. Yeah. So, I mean, straight away you'd look at that and go, that is a poison, right? Whereas the program itself and the ministers are trying to say to us, it's not a poison, it's an insect growth regulator. Well, it's still poisonous.
Yeah, and I think that minimisation of it, because it was so minimised when I was talking to the guys that were doing my property, they weren't wearing the protective, the protective safety gear, and they were minimising the effects of this and saying no non-target species, and it's specifically made for fire ants and all the rest of it. But when we look at this harmful to aquatic life with long-lasting effects, that should have alarm bells on it, shouldn't it?
Yeah. And avoid release to the environment. Well, chucking it out of a helicopter is pretty much putting it everywhere in the environment.
Yeah. So I feel that it's pretty irresponsible. But what they've done, haven't they? They've got the AV, is it Australian Veterinary Pesticides Medical Authority, APVMA, and they've got a special permit to be able to put this stuff out because they deem that the problem with fire ants outweighs any problems that these chemicals may occur in their justification of it. But I want to bring people to the attention, because there's so much stuff here about usage precaution, keep away from food, drink, and animal feeding stuffs. So that's interesting. Like they baited, or they distributed this stuff where I feed my cows. They feeded it in my dam where my cows drink. So all these things.
And that weekend in Sanford, they were putting it all over the national parks where there's, waterfalls and waterways, and like you had in your area, all those waterways feed into our dams and into our creeks and rivers in the valley, similar to you. So it's just a huge amount of this stuff going into our environment, into our water.
Yeah, because the waterway is sort of like distributed into one area, washes into the runways of the water, and I forget, I don't know the word, but it sort of like congregates all the high toxins in one space, like eventually, and that's sort of what's happened to me. But as you read through these documents, it does become quite, I suppose, concerning, that about it. But the ones that I want to bring everyone to is section 12. Section 12, ecological information. So toxicity, harmful to aquatic life, as we already established. But this is an interesting one: persistence and degradability. So the degradability of this product is not known, so we don't know that. This product hasn't done the research on that, and bioaccumulation is not known as well. So and mobility in the soil, no data available as well. So these are three big factors in the effects that these chemicals could have, and there's just no information on the safety data sheet, is it?
No, and it's quite incredible that they're allowed to throw it over 850,000 hectares of southeast Queensland when there's all this unknown stuff about its bioaccumulation. So and they're not doing it once; they're doing it 6 times.
Yeah. Well, even more. Well, they've done it even more than 6 times in my area. Like I said, we've been getting it done since 2019. But the interesting thing is too, and I feel it's very similar for me, we never had fire ants anywhere near us. Like I said, maybe up around 8 kilometres away there was a nest or something, but I've never seen any fire ants in my neighbouring areas or my area or any suburbs near me. And it's a term they use, prophylactic treatment, isn't it? And that's similar up in Sanford Valley. You've already said there was no fire ants up in your area at all, not even 8 kilometres away, was there?
No, well, they said there was a few nests in one of the other suburbs down from where we are, which is in Camp Mountain and Whites Mountain. But when we started questioning locals, it was because they were brought in a pile of mulch. And so the ants didn't even go in the ground. Somebody brought in some landscaping supplies. Somebody found fire ants in those landscaping supplies. They removed the ants. They removed the nest if there was one in the, and it never even went in the ground. So how can they say they have to now do a 5 kilometer radius or whatever? But we're definitely more than 5 kilometers away from that. But they've just seemed to have done, like I said, they're now doing the whole of outer Brisbane in this prophylactic program.
Yeah.
Just in case a nest or an ant has flown up to 5 Ks, and we know that they rarely go that far anyway.
Yeah, and so it's a horseshoe approach, and I think that started, and this is different to what I was exposed. I'm exposed to it now because I'm on the band as well. So it's about a 10-kilometre wide belt that goes from the Gold Coast, out the Lockyer Valley way, past Boone or whatever, Lockyer Valley, up past Sanford Way, and then up to Caboolture or Sunshine Coast now or somewhere.
Caboolture,
yeah. And regardless on whether there's fire ants or not evident, they're baiting that area 6 times in the next 2 years, and that's called the eradication program. And what they're going to try and do is, once they're confident that there's none in that band after surveillance, they're going to try and move that band in and then do the next 10-kilometre radius, 10-kilometre wide strip, and do that for 2 years while evaluating this. So that's what's called the eradication program. But the area in between the eradication program and the coast is what's called the suppression zone, where and there's different funding. You've done a bit of research onto that, have you, on the different funding approaches of these programs?
Yeah, well, I think most of them now are left up to the councils to pay. So the councils then will be charging the ratepayers more money, even though we're already paying for the eradication program. The ratepayers are now having to pay for the FAST program, which is the ones in the middle. And now people are being told to poison the nests themselves, and they're being given little pots of the ant bait to do it themselves.
Yeah.
But up until now, nobody was allowed to treat their own nests, were they?
Yeah.
It was actually illegal to treat your own nests, which is why this problem's got so big, because people were sitting there for months waiting for someone from the program to come and help them.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because so we've got an eradication zone where there's 20 plus people per property, or helicopters, and there's motorbikes, and quite a lot of crews and staff, I suppose, or contractors working that 10-kilometre radius, most of which, maybe some down the bottom down the Gold Coast, but most of the areas that where we are and where you are is no fire ants, and they get a treaty. And the other thing from investigating and looking at this, the productiveness of this program is often, especially you've had Mount Glorious done, and you had and another few mountains done where it's all treed canopies. And them areas, and we've got some up here on the sides of the ranges as well, and some of the mountains, we've got very similar sort of layouts there where it's just all trees and bushland from national parks or whatever, and a lot of them areas are aerial baited, but there's zero chance of fire ants establishing successful colonies in them areas.
No, especially areas like Mount Glorious. I mean, that's rainforest. That is dense rainforest where the ants don't even like living in the shade, and actually what's really weird is those areas weren't even in the eradication program. If you look at that horseshoe, Mount Nebo and Mount Glorious was supposed to be in the surveillance zone, the blue area, but we had a local in Sanford who took a photo of those helicopter flight paths, and they were literally like spaghetti all over the mountains.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have even been doing those areas.
Yeah, and the distribution, or the equal distribution, or the appropriate distribution as per the permit is just about impossible to regulate on them crisscrossing paths. And I've seen some of them sketchy paths of tracking, and concernably nowadays, because of that bringing that to their attention, they now turn off their transponders so we can't track their helicopters on these sort of activities. And this is some of the frustrations that I get with this whole program in their transparency. But I know we can talk about that a lot, but I'll just move on now because the other product is called Engage, and its active ingredient is S-methoprene. And it's got, let's see, I'll just stop sharing that one. I'll just try and get it up again. Just have a few technical issues, but we'll just move through them. That's it. So, and if we look at this one, it's very similar, and they're promoting this one, Sarah, as organic chemical, is it?
There's nothing organic about this one other than that they've somehow got the APVMA to give them permission to put it onto organic farms with only a 3-week withholding period, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not organic. It's synthetic.
Yeah. It's interesting. So it's got the same. Let's just go through this a bit. So it's the same chemical supplier. So the active ingredient of this is S-methoprene here, but this is Engage is the brand that they're utilizing, isn't it? So it's similar with the aquatic chronic. That's like a tongue twister, isn't it, in itself? And yeah, very, very toxic to aquatic life with long-lasting effects. So very similar to pyriproxyfen.
Yeah, instead of highly toxic, it's very toxic, but that still means it's toxic.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the difference. So one says highly and one says very.
So they're allowed to now put this one into water as well, because it's only very toxic, not highly toxic.
Yeah. And talking to people from environmental science, the effects of these chemicals are very dependent on the weather, on the environment, including soil types and layout of the land, the elevations and the slopes and everything on the land and the shades and the so there's so many variables and including the susceptibility of these chemicals to certain animals. It's like some humans are allergic to peanut paste. Some people have, or some animals could have more non-target effects than others. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because obviously if everybody was having problems with these chemicals, obviously everybody would, because they've been chucking these chemicals around for a long time. But like you say, some people are more susceptible than others. Some dogs are more susceptible than others. You know, those dogs that were getting sick at the Gold Coast with that vet verifying it, they all like to lick their paws. You know, they were paw licking dogs. So they were walking on these chemicals, licking their paws, whereas other dogs might not, you know, do that as much. So it definitely depends on, the concentration and the conditions. Have it rained? Is it damp? Is it humid? I mean, we don't even know really how the intense heat here in Queensland is also affecting those chemicals.
Yep. And it says here exactly the same as pyriproxyfen, that the degradability of this product is not known, and there's no data available on bioaccumulation, and the mobility in soil, there's no data available as well. So it's very similar in the fact that a lot of these things haven't got any information available on them, which is very scary, do you think?
And there's less studies on S-methoprene. And what's interesting is on the Kramer scale of chemicals, S-methoprene has a higher risk classification than pyriproxyfen. Pyriproxyfen is a class 1, which is the lowest, and S-methoprene is a class 3, which is the highest on this Kramer scale. So this Kramer scale thinks S-methoprene's worse Whereas this program is promoting this chemical as being safe for organic farms, safe to put into water up to 1.5 meters from the embankment. And yeah, they're telling everyone, especially in Sanford now, after they poisoned us with pyriproxyfen, that they're only using S-methoprene.
Yeah.
But that doesn't give me any comfort.
No, and that's the real disappointing thing, because there's no actually specific Australian studies done in these areas at that scale. Because I think you mentioned 850,000 hectares the fire ant distribution is, and this is the perimeter of that, which is hundreds and hundreds of kilometres over diverse ecosystems, isn't it? Different, like from beach type environments to the mountains, Tambourine Mountains and ranges, and the Toowoomba Range and Sanford Valley, and up through the dam areas. It's so much diversity in that you couldn't drive the eradication zone in one day without being tired, could you? Because it's like literally hundreds of kilometres to get from one end to the other.
Yeah, well, we're talking over 2 million acres of land.
Is that for the whole distribution of fire?
Yeah, that's for the whole distribution. I think in the inner zone it's 650,000 hectares, and so it must be
200,000.
Yeah, 200,000 that they're doing in this one go.
Yeah, and there's been nothing of that scale. There's been no evidence, or there's no that sort of scale hasn't been done before. Have you seen anything where that's been done, or is there any justification for doing that much land without any, like, they haven't even done an environmental impact study, have they?
No, they've done a very pathetic study that was from data in 2001, and it was released in 2014, just on where they just looked at other ants, and they're using that as their environmental risk assessment, saying, oh, we did all these studies on native ants and fire ants and found out that 9 out of the 10 ants repopulated, but one of the ants didn't repopulate that well. And also that study was only looking at blocks of land that were on average only 532 square meters in size. So of course the native ants from the outside is going to repopulate, because it's only 532 square meters. Whereas we're talking, you're creating this barrier ring of around 850,000 hectares and working your way in. So where are the native ants going to repopulate from? Toowoomba, and even then, they're only looking at ants. What about all the other insects?
Yeah.
Like the ground nesting bees that have to live in the soil, that we're going to obviously talk about the pyriproxyfen and how it affects the soil and how long it lives in the soil. But we have no environmental risk assessment that shows how it affects all our native insects, how it affects all the other wildlife.
Even as such as the blocks that they used in the city didn't even contain dams with drinking water for livestock, or dams, because I know my dams haven't got the mussels, crayfish, or any fish life in them at all. There was none of them in that report at all. And like you say, like even my block's pretty small compared to some, but some of these blocks at the aerial baiting are hundreds of acres, and they're comparing that to a 500 metre square city block. And that 100 acres is on the side of the mountain with lots of runoff and lots of dam water catchment areas and this and that. So it is quite concerning anyway, isn't it? So I was looking into this, Sarah, and over from July 9th, I think it was, I put down my second calf, and was going through all this and talking to you and other people and trying to work all this stuff out. And eventually I got my necropsy report and back on about a month later or something like that. So the main thing is, I suppose, with it is they tested for every possible alternative virus. I don't know, PCR, bovine viral diarrhea virus, spleen virus, hemodiffusion test, bovine viral diarrhea, all these blood tests they done to try and find to see if there was something that could explain, because the liver was 1.5 times the ordinary size, and the final diagnosis of my calf is degenerative. You might have to help me with the pronunciation of that, sir. Is it hepatopathy and
Hepatopathy or something like that. Hepatopathy and hepatic encephalopathy. Yeah, so definitely liver.
It's quite a mouthful. So I went to Google and I typed in them words in Google, and let's just have a look to see if I can get some definitions for us, because it's quite important to understand that them words do have meaning. Next, and like you say, the liver was full of toxins, and it was 1.5 times its normal size. And have a look here. Just bear with, here it is here. So it says here, degenerative liver disease is a term that describes the presence of degenerative changes in the liver. Hepatopathy is a general term for abnormal or diseased state of the liver. So it's a diseased liver that's denigrating. And hepatic encephalopathy, the loss of brain function when a damaged liver doesn't remove toxins from the blood. So that's what. So it's liver disease, failed liver from the disease, creating cognitive decline because the toxins from the blood wasn't getting removed. So the cause of the illness in this case was a severe hepatopathy characterized by pre-existing and active hepatocellular necrosis and fibrosis. So hepatonephrosis, also known as liver necrosis, is the death of liver cells, and fibrosis is the thickening and scarring of the connective tissue, which doesn't mean a lot, but toxic liver damage and they're distributing toxic chemicals from the helicopter and the motorbikes and by hand. It sort of creates a little bit of suspicion. So
yeah. And didn't you say, or are you going on to say that that you don't have any other like noxious weeds or anything on your property?
Yeah, and that's the thing, I suppose, with this report, because it says here, let's see if I can find it here. It's quite a long report, but comment. So that's what it says, the cause of the illness in this case. So it says toxic and/or genetic hepatitis is favoured over infectious inflammatory, because they tested all the infectious stuff and inflammatory stuff. So they said toxic and/or genetic. But excuse me. Excuse me.
Bless you.
My cattle are DNA tested and parentage, and we have lines 10 plus generations, and we've never had any liver problems or toxic problems before, and these were the first two calves that we died. So I can rule out generic straight away. So it's a toxic. So they talk about fireweed and other weeds, lantana. There's some weeds that can cause toxic liver, but we don't have any of them weeds on my property. My property is pretty well maintained. We don't have any of them sort of toxic weeds. It's only 10 acres, and we've got a small acreage, and our cows are very well looked after, and we feed them every day and watch them and keep an eye on them all the time. So there's no way that they've any toxins come from any other source except for what I presume's happened is the aerial baiting has distributed some of the toxic baits into their trough water and into their dam water, and they've drinking it, and repeated exposure over the many treatments that they've occurred, because sometimes they would treat our block, and then some other times they might do neighbouring blocks which have the same runoff, and then if it rains, then some of the toxic chemicals can pollute their water source as well. So just repeated exposure to these chemicals over 5 years has created an environment where the cows have embryo and fetus development problems from these toxic poisons, to create what normally happens is the cattle would have more miscarriages, but these did go the full term, but they died of this liver toxic poisoning within a 6-week time frame. So and there's no evidence to suggest, because there's nothing done about the bioaccumulation of these chemicals. No one knows about that, and my cattle could be quite susceptible, you know what I mean? And obviously they are, because they've got toxic poisoning and died. So they talk about in the program, they talk about how you have to eat your own body weight to to die. But like you said, there's other vet, Dr. Michael, whatever his name was, Currumbin or whatever.
Yeah, Michael O'Donoghue.
Yeah. He said that like you said, the dogs are just licking their paws, and that was enough. So different susceptibilities, and he talks about, because they talk about your spot treatment on the back of the dogs, but he says sometimes they have allergic reactions and they've got to do something different, and they've got to intervene when that happens. So there's all sorts of stuff that's going on, and they just don't know about the bioaccumulation of these on cattle over repeated exposures. This sort of stuff probably wouldn't happen if it was once, but like you said, they're talking about 6 times over 2 years. So
yeah, and then areas like yours that had more treatments before.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, some areas in the scenic rim have been aerially baited 11 times.
Yeah, since 2016, I see.
Yeah.
So that's so they're the 2 chemicals, S-methoprene and Distonate plus with the pyroproxyfen, and Engage with this S-methoprene, and they're quite toxic. It says they're toxic, especially to aquatic life, and you've got some research that you found talking about the accumulation of them.
Yeah. Do you want me to share that one?
Yeah, if you can.
So
we'll just call it a technical thing.
I know I'm not these technical stuff's not my forte.
Yeah.
Open with, and then I can share. Right. Don't go to Google. Sorry.
That's right. No, but it's quite interesting. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. So this was a study done in 20. Was this one? This one was 2008. This one was an older one, but you can see the highlighted parts. It says it talks about half-lives, which is the breakdown of the chemical. So the parent chemical, which is pyriproxyfen, breaks down into metabolites, which are actually more toxic. So they're saying it can be up to 20 days in river water. In soils, photodegradation proceeds much slower, with half-lives in the range of 10 to 20 weeks. So the half-lives are what the chemicals break down into. The metabolism in aerobic media proceeds relatively quickly, less than 100 days. So aerobic means with oxygen, but it's saying with anaerobic metabolism, it is much slower. Again, with half-lives up to 700 days. So in areas where there are no oxygen. These chemicals can last a long time, and it's consistent with chemicals that are known to be environmentally persistent. So if they're environmentally persistent, does that mean they are, forever chemicals? So there's a lot of unknowns about pyriproxyfen.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing about it, because you just don't know, and they can't dismiss because they haven't got the information. And because I did get a response about this, and I can just share it. Do you want to just shut that one down for a second?
Oh, yeah.
I'll just share this one. So this one's supposed to be secret, and I'm not supposed to share anyone, and it was confidential. I didn't make it confidential, but the person that sent it to me is supposed to be confidential. So this was a lame attempt to try and remove responsibility from the program. So what they did is they hired this company, SLR, and this lady here, Ryan Cope, and from SLR Consulting Australia. So and it just goes through some background of them and background of my calves and all that sort of stuff, and the National Fire Act. So the interesting thing is in this one here, this is the second table I got after they provided me another table. But even when you look at this table here, the treatments of my property, I know for a fact there are other dates on there where my neighbour's properties was done aerial baited that aren't in my table, but it would have affected my drinking water for my cows as well. So there's a lot of circumstances here where my cattle would have been exposed to the chemicals that aren't registered on this table. And that's why there's still a review going on this at the moment, but the program provided them this table in isolation. And these are the ones, which are probably even debatable as well. But because I didn't keep any exact documentations of what they've done, even to get this table from them, it took me quite a lot of effort, a couple of months actually. And I noticed that there's no actual kgs per, there's no actual volume, or there's no actual weight of the distribution on these dates. And when they fill in the tables, I don't know if they got it here, but they fill in the tables as if they used as per the permit, but often they used a lot, the distribution was much greater than the permit. So and when you look at some of these things, let's see if I can find. So the dates that they used anyway, the birth dates of the cattle and the date of death, and also they didn't include any of the rain dates. So some of the days that these distributions were done on the dates that they provided, especially I think it's on this bottom one here, the 21st of the 3rd, or might be that one, I forget, but there was 13 mil of rain fallen on one on the same day, and there was like 100 mil of rain fell within 5 days of the other one as well. So they didn't allow for any rainfall as well. But a lot of these things they can't. Let's see if we can get some. So that's the extensive cow farm. They can't actually. They use really generic words saying unlikely, or they blame. They take small conclusions. So based on the available data, which isn't correct and isn't complete, the evaluation present above, it is unlikely that pyroproxyfen, S-methoprene, or other components of the ant baits are responsible for the disease of these two carps. So based on incomplete data or misleading information, it's still only unlikely. They can't say it's definitely not, and I find it quite frustrating as well. But let's have a look. It says here even that it says there's some stuff in here that says like the APVMA would have or should have or could have done their due diligence, but we all know that even last year the APVMA, you know, they were overrun by the chemical companies, and there was a big audit into their you know, processes, and so it's quite bizarre. But even with all this, indicate that neither profile are likely. So even in this closure are likely. They can't say, you know, they can only use very generic words. And when you look at the report, often it will say the APVMA would have done something, but it doesn't show what they did do to you know, to justify it, you know. So it's just a lot of and it's under review now, because obviously we need to get the extra dates in there and actually get the correct dates for the cow's death and birth and everything. But just all seems to lead to more misinformation and not taking responsibility for their own actions. That what is it? Non-transparency, and that's something that you're finding a lot of, is it, Sarah?
Yeah, just no transparency, no accountability. After they contaminated our creek and our river, they only actually admitted to contaminating the creek. They didn't do any follow-up tests of the river. And I spoke to Department of Environmental Science and Innovation, which investigated the contamination event that happened here. And when I asked them, you know, you're going to share your reports with us to show what's happened, what damage has been done, what they've done to clean it up, they said no, they wouldn't be sharing it because they're just another government department. So you've got the government running a program, reporting itself to the government, being approved by the government, and then being investigated by the government. So, you know, how do we have any confidence whatsoever that they're doing the right thing? And so, I mean, yeah, it was incredible. So Department of Environmental Science and Innovation hasn't shown any kind of reports to us, and now the program's coming back to Sanford in the next week or so, saying, oh, we've all been given the all clear to return. We're not going to use pyroproxyfen anymore, we're just going to use S-methoprene. But how do we know that, you know, when they're dumping it all into the creeks and waterways, it's not going to have, you know, these long-term effects on all the aquatic life and all the other animals that are drinking that water?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you just share that. I just got this other just screen. I suppose it's just a snippet from email from talking, because I've done a lot of communications with the APVMA. And I'll just share this paragraph because it relates very much to what you were saying there. I don't know if you can read that, but I asked the the AERP, which is the Adverse Experience Reporting Program, if they would provide me with any results of their investigation when they're investigating it as they come on hand. And this is their statement that they emailed me. Unfortunately, I cannot guarantee that the AERP will be able to provide you with the outcome of the assessment. There are several factors which affect whether we can provide any information following an assessment. One example is that we cannot provide further information if it is considered that the outcome of an assessment may lead to an investigation. That's what they emailed me. So that's when I knew that it didn't really matter what I reported to the APVMA. They weren't going to stop the program. And that's where I thought, I suppose we had to get a little bit proactive. But anyway, Sarah, that's we've been talking about this for a while now, and we just wanted to make them a couple of points with safety data sheets. How they haven't they don't know what the bioaccumulation is. They don't know what any of these things. And in fact, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that it does, and it can build up in soils and this and that. So
yeah, and there's plenty of other studies that we haven't looked at that basically say the same thing, that these chemicals, they break down into other chemicals, metabolites, and they have longer lasting and more damaging effects than what the original parent chemical has. And many scientists have spoken out about this, including Dr. Matt Landos, Dr. Connie Turney, you know, and then, yeah, what we know is by devastating native insects and native ants, we're taking away the would-be competitors of the fire ants. So this whole prophylactic, indiscriminate killing of all insects is only going to lead to a bigger problem with the fire ants in the long run.
And that's the biggest lie that I feel that we're fed, isn't it? Because these baits are not designed or not specific for fire ants, are they? Like they're non-targeted. Whatever touches them or whatever eats them, it's going to kill them, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you're a meat ant or whether you're a sugar ant or.
I know, and this is what they keep trying to tell people. They're like, oh, but you know, they're specifically designed for fire ants, but we've seen these chemicals being used on Australian ants and in other countries that are a pest. So is it like Christmas Island or one of the Pacific Islands? They use the same distance ant bait to kill the Australian ants that are a pest there. So
yeah. And I think the actual label on the distant ant bait says it actually calls up 5 ants. And I think Connie Turner, you mentioned Dr. Connie Turney there before, and she actually, I think there's five ant species listed on the label. One of them is a meat ant, but yeah, so they're certainly not specifically designed for fire ants. And I've been talking to Dr. Joshua King from Florida University, and he's right against that program, and that's one of the big. By killing native ants, you're effectively creating an easier environment for the super pests, which are fire ants, to invade an area because they've got no native competition, which is basically in your area, my area, they're literally priming that environment or that landscape for an invasion of fire ants. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, well, even Reese Pianta, you know, the advocacy manager from the Invasive Species Council, he actually said meat ants are a competitor of the fire ants. So, you know, if we kill the meat ants, we're just letting the fire ants go rogue. And that's exactly what happened in the USA. And they said we made that big mistake in the USA by indiscriminately killing all the insects.
Yeah.
So, and when we're just going back to the APVMA, I mean, they were accused of corporate capture just last year. Yeah, they had an ABC article done on them saying, you know, after a thorough review by the lawyers Clayton Ukes, every level of that organization has major issues. Corruption.
Corporate capture is the big one. Yeah, I read that report. I forget his name. But I did read that, and they were talking about all the management and even a bad work culture of bullying and that sort of stuff. And it's and like you say, it was only last year. So some of these decisions and some of these things that have been implemented are probably still from that corrupt. From that corrupt establishment or from that corrupt administration,
Yeah.
So I know you're working hard, and what do you want to happen, Sarah? Like in your words, moving forward, we're not happy with what's happened in the past, and we're very, very disengaged with the way that they've handled themselves and the transparency and all that sort of stuff. But in an ideal world, moving forward, what would you like to see happen?
Well, definitely the program needs to be halted with pending for thorough reviews on the whole environmental risk assessment, the funding. I mean, the funding of this program is ridiculous. It encourages the program to keep running forever, because calling it eradication means they get 90% of the funding from the Commonwealth and the other states. So they need to really do an independent inquiry, even a commissioner, inquiry of commission or commission of inquiry by the new LNP government. That could be a start to really investigate what is going on. I mean, this whole program seems to be just an employment program. They're clearly not eradicating ants. They've been running this program on and off for 20 years. The ants are 20 times worse, and they've spent over $1 billion. So I think taxpayers should be absolutely outraged that all their money is being wasted on chucking chemicals indiscriminately over areas like Sanford, areas like yours. There's no fire ants here. If there are, none of them are probably going to eat it anyway, because these queen ants, they live underground for like many months, don't they? And they don't even forage for a long time. So I guess, I just want the program halted. And in the meantime, we need to deal with the nests that are active and allow people to be in charge of dealing with the nests themselves. If they want to use chemicals, you can use a chemical, but if you want to use a hot water system like what you've got going, or boil a kettle, even if you haven't got that many nests, you should be able to use hot water. You should be able to use orange oil. You should be able to use diatomaceous earth, which is what a lot of other people do now. And we need to just get on with living our lives and accepting that fire ants, regardless of whether this program goes ahead or not, we're going to be living with them forever.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. And that my biggest point is, I suppose, prophylactic treatment. I just don't get it. If there's no evidence of fire ants or no fire ants there, then why are we putting baits down and not, like you say, not addressing the mass infestations that are there? So I would like to see the resource, and I don't know why it can't happen. Why can't you treat existing nests, infestation zones, get them under control, and still use the funding from the eradication program to do that, rather than that being a fast program and bait where there's no fire ants under the eradication program? So I'm really confused about that. But I would like to see, for me, zero aerial baiting at all. I don't want any aerial baiting, especially just at all, but especially in canopy areas and forestry areas where there's zero chance of them fire ants existing. But also too, even some of these drone baiting and that on some of these parks where people walk their dogs or kids play and all this sort of stuff. I just don't want that stuff there, and more signage in that when it is there. But like you say, if you put signage there when you're doing it for that day, that stuff could be in the ground for 20 days, a month, So really, I would like to see a targeted approach and actually target individual nests. And they're calling it a suppression sort of thing. But I don't know why, as part of the eradication program, you can't target the actual fire ant nests. And that's my biggest point. And like you say, whether you're an organic farmer or you don't like chemicals or you've got different reasons, you should be able to have a choice of your treatment, even if it have to go through an approval process first. I know you mentioned, what is it, demonic earth, and that I think Josh King doesn't suggest that is very effective, but whatever approach we can come up with, and if it works, we should be able to do it. And I feel that that's not unreasonable.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we just need to. The only reason they're doing the prophylactic baiting though is because they have to be seen to be doing an eradication program. If they just treat the nests in Logan or whatever, they can't eradicate them, because they've been doing that for decades and it hasn't made a difference. So they're now coming up with this new way to make it look like they're eradicating, but they're not. Because even since they've been doing the new eradication program, the ants are already at the Sunshine Coast. They're at Oakey, they're at Ballina. It's the horse is bolted. They're no longer they're not even containing these ants, and that is what they should really be focusing on. But like I said, that $500 million of funding for the current program gets totally taken away if it's not called eradication. So the whole structure of it is just is designed to make people encourage an eradication program. So
and that in a time of what is it, cost of living crisis, I think domestic violence, I think we're losing 2 women a year to domestic violence. I think homelessness, there's so much investment that become homelessness. And also too, like the Bruce Highway, the M1, it hasn't got a divide in between. A couple hundred people die there every year because the amount of money that they're spending on this program could create some infrastructure to make life better for many decades to come. But yet they're throwing toxic bait, ruining our environment, polluting my waterways, affecting non-target species, like you say, for the sake of having to do an eradication program. So I feel, one other point I wanted to make is about the suppression of these current ants. So some of these chemicals, if you repeated exposure to these fire ants, they build an immunity to them. So they stop working. This is why they can't destroy it. This is why they're not focusing on these ants, because they either build an immunity to them, and there has been talk that you can change the formula slightly if you need to, to get them to work again. But in addition, there's also a phenomenon called bait shyness, where they just don't take the bait back to their queen because it's like a learned experience or some sort of phenomenon going on where they go, hang on a minute, I don't want to do that because that might kill my queen after probably previous experience or some sort of I don't know what goes on, a bit more research on that phenomenon. But there's these things that occur that make it hard to, if not impossible, to eradicate these things. So
yeah, they are. I believe these ants have definitely built a tolerance to this bait. In I think on where they've got, there's one, I think it's Christmas Island again, or somewhere they've got the electric crazy ant, I think, or yellow crazy ant. They actually said those ants built up the tolerance to distance the bait, and they ended up having to bring in some micro wasp to deal with the ants because but they've been using these poisons for like over 20 years, so of course
if it was going to work, it would have worked by now, wouldn't it? Because in 2001 they were discovered. When they discovered, they done a survey and different guesstimates, but between 10 and 20 years they estimate that that the ants were here before they were discovered, based on the number of nests and the density and the size and maturity of their nests in the area. And so that's up to 40 plus years these ants have been around. And from all counts that I talk to a lot of people, I don't think they're having too much effect. I know they do say things, and if you chuck a green frog on a nest and stir it up, it will probably eat the green frog. But ultimately, I feel that the damage is caused by these poisons and indiscriminate baiting and the non-target effects and the harm to the waterways and the environment far outweigh the potential harm that could happen from the exponential, which is happening anyway, isn't it? Let's be honest, the exponential distribution of these fire ants. So, but anyway, I think we covered a lot, Sarah. So thank you very much for going through that with us, and we might be able to make another one of these and have a different discussion about it, because I know both you and me, we can talk about this for weeks. So
yes, no, we should definitely get together again, and we'll talk about the different areas that are, have concern. So
no worries. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you. Okay, see you. Bye.